and that was tariff risk as we presumed it yesterday. So what you have to do now is begin to allow
Boom.
for some alleviation of that stress. And
Boom, boom,
obviously that's what
boom.
you're seeing today. So this would be an
That's
as
30 minutes
expected
before
response in
the
the
actual meeting.
in the discussion drama here, where you begin to see the
Jeez.
president pull back from some of the stated tariff circumstance.
You know, Scott, 5 minutes ago, we were talking about how the U.S. was going to kind of reassemble this new economic order, including what the implications were for treasuries and all the rest of it. Now, does it matter?
Yeah, I think it still matters, but I don't think to the same degree. Obviously, you've alleviated the pressure point here for now. And I think that discussion in terms of the global world financial order probably gets pushed back to the background for now. But again, as we've learned, things can change quickly. I think what we're looking at here in terms of the Secretary Besson angle is that he's been a little bit more of the view that we get it. There's some tariff aspect here that makes sense, but let's not go overboard. You go back to where we started, Kelly. I mean, going into this year, we were modeling, okay, we're going to get a 10% across the board tariff that maybe gets negotiated down to 5%. That's a marginal impact on
Rooney.
S&P 500 fundamentals. We can live with that because of all the other things going on with fundamental dynamics. So I think when you then went to 20%, much bigger issue, much bigger headwind for the S&P. You're alleviating some of that and putting us back to where we started, I think, a couple of months back.
And let's trace the events back to, was it just last Wednesday was Liberation Day, as the president called it, April 2nd, the announcement of what had been in the works for weeks, if not months, reciprocal tariffs. There was all of this surprise and concern about how those rates were actually calculated. A lot of surprise that they were as high as they were on certain partners like Vietnam, who had seemed to play ball, weren't necessarily the worst actors and so forth. We've heard days now of defense of this regime of basically saying we're trying to close the trade deficit, we're trying to reorder the U.S. economy, and all of this from all of the major cabinet advisors, all of them kind of trying to lay out this scenario. And now the president has backed down.
Well, look, I think when you looked at the Liberation Day statistics, I think Vietnam jumped out as like, here's an example of the math that they use to compute tariff rates predicated on trade deficits.
Right.
I'm going to say probably has some issues, right? Because it didn't take into account the reality of the underlying fundamental circumstance of the relationship with many of these countries, and Vietnam is the poster child for that. So I think the moment investors saw that, it's like, wait a minute,
it's going to speak in 30
not
minutes,
right with the
so
formula, with the approach, which I think precipitated a lot of the reaction Thursday,
so
Friday,
what they did, they pushed the price up to take the previous day high.
From our perch, we went into Q2 getting more aggressive on the growth part of the market.
So they took the previous day high. They took those guys out.
On the view that at some
soon
point,
as the news hit
through, that part of the market that got hit first is more likely to snap
here
back
so you
quickest.
can see
and
it.
I think that's what we're seeing now unfold. So I think the playbook's changing quickly.
As soon as
a lot of uncertainty to alleviate
the news hit, they took those guys out, which is that previous day high. That's why I like my setup, right? I have it all lined, right? PDH, previous day high, PDL, previous day low, that's the low, that's the high. It's here when we took the trade yesterday.
Who was in the Oval Office moments ago. They're offering no color, no insight, no context here to the president's decision, just saying simply
trade that we took yesterday.
Truth Social post that the president put up on social media. I can tell you that I was standing next to some lower level aides in the West Wing when this hit the wires.
That was the high of yesterday. Previous day high was taken.
All of them were surprised to see it. The president had given no indication that he was thinking about reversing
that
course
liquidity.
on the future of his tariff
Take
program.
those guys out.
Obviously, he's bifurcating his response here. One
response
for China, one response for the rest of the
world.
What
am I doing here?
They had told me here at the White House earlier today that there were more than 70 countries that had sought negotiations with the White House. The president suggesting in his report, just in his post,
the president is going to make these accounts getting blown.
Reversal by this White House, and aides here are not in a position right now to offer any kind of context or insight into why.
I feel sorry for these guys. They thought it's safe.
There were reports off of Capitol Hill that Treasury
and then boom,
was set to meet with a number of Republicans
2 o'clock.
meeting was canceled. Bessent was said to be headed to a meeting at the White House. Presumably, that has something to do with this. We haven't quite connected those dots just yet, though, Kelly, to know exactly who was in the Oval Office with the president at the time that the president made this decision. I'm just checking to make sure. Marine at the West Wing.
My bad, my bad, my bad, my bad, my bad, my bad.
In the West Wing, and that is the case. So the president is here. We don't know who's in the Oval Office with him, and we don't know why he made this decision, Kelly.
The NASDAQ is up about
There's
8%.
a lot of things that we don't know.
Up 10%. Amen. And again, going back, there were not any
there is lots of things that we do not know.
Says, those countries
but what we know
retaliated in any way
is
authorized a 90-day pause. But there's really no
that those guys
even
was taken out
we all thought going to use these negotiations as a way of winning
like literally
maybe it's
what was that?
Maybe it is lower
A 5-minute candle, 2-minute 5 minutes, with 10 minutes, like it was crazy. But that's what the price.
Right. So
this is what they do when they push the price.
As you point out,
they seek liquidity.
If they're already at the table, and you've got the pressure succeeding and the sense of
previous day high was taking.
The market was up.
See, I love my setup, right?
Into this, but you also
because it's clean.
Of the Treasury market,
right? Where are you gonna get cleaner than this?
And real concerns about what that meant for the future of the U.S. economy. So it may
sessions.
That the president decided,
so you know what's going on,
So, in terms of
previous days,
he's got people at the table.
Previous day high, previous day low, previous week high, previous week low too. So speaking weeks, speaking days.
Who's watching this 10% snapback.
So, you can sit down and start drawing things and you can do that, or you can just
now, the China tariff goes up, Steve, interestingly enough,
save time and just be consistent. You focus on other things. You don't just focus on, oh, where am I going to draw my, where am I going to draw this? We're taking time because you got to save time and focus on the moves, focus on the volatility of the market, not focusing on the wrong stuff, right? There is tools for it, right? There is tools. If you're a profitable trader, right, pay a little bit more, right, and invest in these tools. And focus on the market. Focus on the market shift. Focus on where you put your TP, where you put your stop losses, where you put. Focus on the things that matters rather than let's draw take you fucking 20 million classes so you can understand where's the liquidity. Where is it? Yes. Just invest in pay a little bit more and get quality results and not worry about these things. Worry about how you make money. Worry about to, secure your profits. That's what you need to worry about.
To fulfill the demand that we have here in the United States. It is a relief. There's no doubt
about
it. That's why we're seeing the spike in shares.
Or you can worry about the other shit.
So heavily dependent on China.
Focus on your shit. Invest a little bit more money and get something clean, like this setup, right? So this is London, right? This is New York AM. That's New York PM, right? So this is New York. You have the afternoon session, right? New York PM. The news. 2 p.m. before the news, DT announced that, hey, we're putting pause on the tariffs. And as soon as he said that, the previous day high was taken out. Now, this is just part A of the magic trick. Now, part B, it's coming now. So we will see what they're going to say. How the news is going to be volatile. I don't trade when there is news like this, I don't trade it because you never know. Who can, the only person that can predict that is DT. So if DT got an account, right, he will place a buy on a S&P 500 or the US 30. Then he would tweet, I'm removing the tariffs. So everybody's going to be taken out. So he knows. But we don't know, right? We don't know, man. So don't trade. You don't trade these days, right? You don't have to trade every day.
while the
You
China
do
gets the
not.
higher tariff, I also would just say, Kevin,
Uh,
that we do have to see
Actually,
some
when you
paperwork
don't trade
before
these
this higher
days, you
tariff
take it
on China could
as a
go into
wins
effect. The
because you
president would have
just
to sign something on this.
um,
Now
At
we
the
have
White
Caroline.
House, let's see if we can dip in.
minimize the
President
risk.
did
Let's
put
see what's
out a
going to happen
statement
now for you to
announcing an
blow your account.
additional tariff on China. The tariff on China will now go up to 125%
Oh,
because China imprudently decided to
let's
retaliate against the
go.
United States. And as I
Let's
said at the
go.
podium yesterday,
See,
this
that's the
isn't the
UFC
United
fight,
States of America.
that's
President
why,
Trump is going to punch back hard. In that
our
same vein,
president,
we've had more than 75
he
countries from around
doesn't,
the
they
world
don't play
reach out
games,
to
man. We
President
don't
Trump
play
and
games.
his team here at the White House to negotiate better trade deals for the American worker. We have been overwhelmed with the amount of requests from countries around the world. I'll let the
25%,
Secretary
that
speak to
is,
that. We will continue with the tailor-made negotiations that I spoke about yesterday. In the
that
meantime, there will be a
is
90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs as these negotiations are ongoing,
wrong.
and the tariff level will be brought down to a universal 10% tariff. The Secretary here has been a huge part of the President's trade team, of course, and will continue to lead these negotiations moving forward, to look out for the American worker, which is always President Trump's goal. So I'll kick it over to our great Treasury
Let's
Secretary,
go.
Scott Bessent.
Good, thank you. And we saw the successful negotiating strategy that President Trump implemented a week ago today. It has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they're in this very spot, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. So every
There you
country
go.
in the world who wants to come and negotiate, we are willing to hear you. We're going to go down
We're
to
not
a 10%
retaliating.
baseline tariff for them, and China will be raised to 125 due to their insistence on escalation.
Secretary, thank you for doing
Wow.
this. Let me ask you three quick things, if I could, just for the sake of clarity, because the markets are open and they're wondering. First of all, Mexico and China, are they part of this 10% universal?
Well, China, no, China.
Mexico and Canada, are they part of the 10%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Second,
Mexico and China.
given then that you have the rest of the world essentially calling it, it's not China, is this now just all about China?
Well, it's about bad actors, and what
Bad
we will
actors.
see is some of the very early countries
Okay.
are China's neighbors. That we're going to see. I'm seeing Vietnam today. Japan's at the front of the queue. South Korea, India. So we will see. And as I've repeatedly said, and President Trump has been saying it for years, China is the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they are the biggest source of the
All right.
U.S.
We
trade
took
problems.
the
And indeed,
PDH.
they are problems for the rest of the world, because what
Look at
we've
the
seen
gap that it was created.
is that as the U.S. announced a tariff wall last week, many
This
of those goods
gap.
have already started flooding into Europe.
And
Now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world.
they
I'm not calling it a trade
look
war,
at it. This is even my setup.
saying
I have
that
the
China has
premium
escalated,
equilibrium
and President Trump
discount
responded
setup
very
for you.
courageously to that, and we are going to work on a
The
solution
days, the
with
lows, the
our
weeks,
trading partners.
And if I could just
lows, highs,
excuse me, Raquel,
clean.
if I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China, when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need
love us
this
and they need
president
us.
in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Treasury Secretary Bessent. Can you explain more of the decision making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, just these went into effect less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why the pause now? What led to that?
No, again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago? The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we have just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate. Hold your ground. Let's
Yep.
see what happens. And China
Yep.
kept escalating and escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary,
Go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this.
Yep.
The 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, is that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was, what we saw in the stock markets, a part of this decision?
No, it's because because of the large number of inbounds, we've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
Emily.
Mm.
Mr. Secretary, there was a tweet that you and Secretary Lutnick were in the Oval Office with the president talking about this. Can you talk about what that conversation was like and what you guys said to one another that led to this decision?
Look, it's all the president's decision, and the president had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the 3-month, essentially the 3-month pause in mind, and we were discussing the exact wording. Sorry? Of course.
It's the president's decision.
It's the president's decision. It was the president's decision to wait until today. And again, as I've said in the past, no one creates leverage for himself like President Trump.
Yeah.
Shelby, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, what does the president want to see by this, I think it's July 9th deadline to keep things paused? Is it just trade barriers coming down, or is it more than that?
Well, these are trade negotiations, but if countries want to come and offer other things, I talked about yesterday that we are thinking about a big LNG project in Alaska that South Korea, Japan, Taiwan are interested in financing and taking a substantial portion of the offtake. But again, in essence, that is trade because it will decrease the trade deficit that we have with those countries. So everything's on the table.
Raquel, go ahead.
Secretary, a clarification on the pause. What happened to those countries who just had 10% baseline tariffs, like Brazil?
Yeah, so
Are they still going to have this 90-day pause because we're saying that there will be a tariff of 10%?
90-day pause.
Who just had a 10%?
Yeah, that's going to remain.
So hopefully we'll have a 90-day of good trading comebacks.
Well, I'm not sure
Oh,
what you mean by the word embargo.
you never know because tweet will change everything.
Well, it's China's decision that we have the deficit with them. They sell us almost 5 times what we sell them.
Well,
So
China
I
needs
think it's
to,
an own goal by China.
slow down, right? China needs to. China needs to.
It signals that President Trump cares about trade
I don't know what
and
China
that we want to negotiate in good faith. And
Who knows?
as I said, each one of these is going to be
Who
a
knows?
separate, bespoke negotiation. So we are confident that
S&P is back.
having seen the other side of where this could go, and it was like I said last
Dow
week,
is back.
the market didn't
Not
understand
back. It's
those
just
were
coming back,
maximum
but
levels. The countries can think about those
I
levels
think
as
that's
they come
all
to us
manipulation,
to
man.
bring
So
down their
the market
tariffs, their
start
non-tariff trade barriers.
move
We're going to discuss
because it's
currency
this thing,
manipulation,
right?
subsidy
That's what
of
they do.
labor and industry.
What they do. Because if they don't do this, well, anybody can study a couple
No, these are the
patterns and
reciprocal tariffs.
oh, let's make money.
Andrea, go
And
ahead.
these bots that's been swept everything. It's get took these two big candles. Depends on how you look at it.
I,
You're on the
it
1
seems
minute. That's probably took 10 minutes for less than that. Probably
What?
what
6 minutes and
Right? There's been a lot of volatility in the market.
The highs was taken.
Stock market's put on some sort of pause. So will this move in your mind to anticipate that this is going to calm the markets down?
Well, I think what we've seen, I think the willingness by more than 75 countries to come and negotiate, I think now the market understands that everything they saw last Wednesday was a ceiling, and now we have a 10% temporary floor, and I think the market, my 35 years in the market, I always wanted certainty, so I think we've got more certainty.
But Mr. Secretary,
Maggie, go.
35 years in the market.
People assume this is the last word. The president began this morning saying, be cool. 5 hours later, he announces a new policy. Why will investors...
You know, he's not gonna say, oh, what is he gonna say? He works,
As
you
I
know,
said,
he works for DT,
we've
so
given 90 days, and
what are they
the
gonna
only
say?
certainty we can provide is that the U.S. is going to negotiate in good faith, and
Even
we
Uncle
assume
Jerome,
that our allies will too.
Jerome Powell's gonna,
In terms of
he's
certainty,
in
we
a
will
tough
see
spot,
what
man. You don't
China
want to be at
does, but what I
his
am
seat.
certain of,
You don't want to sit on that
is
seat.
that what China is doing will
The
affect
heat,
their economy
that's the
much
heat
more than it
seat.
will ours, because they have an
That's the
export-driven,
heaters.
flood the world with cheap export models, and the rest of the world now understands, because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south.
And you think
Mr. Secretary, how much of this decision was driven by the bond market cratering overnight? What is happening with bonds? Is China selling their bonds?
I have nothing that says that, and we actually
Yeah.
had quite a good 10-year auction today, and all this was, again, this was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all
On
along.
Sunday.
And that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors, and we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well.
Yeah. The
The
airlines, let's go. Let's go.
Well,
The
we actually took a
Nasdaq-aroni.
90-day pause, and we will see
Nvidia.
if
Apple's
more
back.
countries
Well,
turn
come
up,
on, American
what
Express.
will happen. But
Jeez.
we have a meeting
Pay your
with
balance.
Vietnam today, and we have one of
Damn.
the largest trade deficits with them, so I'm hoping it will move
They're
in
gonna
a
come
good
after
direction.
you.
I was at the
Now,
Japanese ambassador's house last night for the Cherry Blossom
not
Festival.
paying
It
that
was very
balance.
festive, and he and I had a good chat. They are going to send a deal team over. So we'll see. These are complicated negotiations. These are imbalances that have taken decades to create. But I think having seen the maximum level that Donald Trump is willing to go to, President Trump has created this negotiating leverage.
Excuse me, everybody. Excuse me. The secretary is obviously a very busy man. As he has said, he's had more than 75
Oh
countries
yeah, he
that
is
the trade
busy.
team has to
Of
respond
course,
to.
he's gotta
I'd just like
be.
to end
Why
with
would
this.
you?
For decades,
He's a busy man.
Republicans and
Yeah,
Democrats have said
of
that
course.
these unfair trade practices are ripping off the American people, are ripping off our country, but nobody has ever done anything to address it. We finally have a president here at the White House who is playing the long game, who is doing what is right for the
Playing the
American
long
worker
game.
and our industries here at home, and he has put together a fantastic team in Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lustnick, the entire trade team who will be focusing on negotiating these good deals to
In
put
2
the
days,
American
$1.6
workers
trillion.
first, and we're going to get to work to do that. Thank you, guys.
Last week. Long game.
Secretary Bessent at an impromptu press conference at the White House.
Four
Press
Walmart
Secretary
companies.
Caroline Leavitt,
Walmart
moments
is
after
like
the
400
president announced on
billion.
Truth Social that he will be
1.6
winding or
trillion.
repealing
That's
or putting on pause
4
the
Walmart
reciprocal
companies.
tariffs,
That's
or
like
leaving in place the 10% tariff for now
approximately.
and ratcheting up tariffs on China. Eamon Javers is standing by
If
at the White
Walmart has
House. And Eamon,
19,000 stores,
only
they all
after a series
lost
of events like
in
what
2
we've seen,
days.
I think when
That's
people
crazy.
absorb the China tariff still being into effect,
But
you're
hey,
still going to have to think
you
through both the
know, where it
inflation, the
seems
growth
like we're coming
aspects of
back,
that, the supply
you
chain
never
hit, but
know.
this is a